Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episodes of Pennyworth as well as the latest episode of Preacher. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I have to say about this week's episodes of Pennyworth, you can skip to what I have to say about this week's episode of Preacher. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episodes of Pennyworth. Obviously, I'm going to be talking about both episodes. I'm probably going to end up blending a lot of stuff together, but I will probably, at the very least, attempt to try and talk about them one at a time. First and foremost, obviously, in the first episode of this week, we got introduced to Martha Kane. I brought that up at the beginning of the series, had no idea that was going to be an episode at all, so it's interesting. Interestingly enough, the title of the episode is, in fact, Martha. Martha Kane specifically, but nevertheless, it's kind of interesting. She comes to, Alfred for help. I mean, the fact is, I should go back, talk about some other stuff. Well, Alfred meets up with, Esme's dad. I think I completely missed the whole fact is they did explain what he does for a profession. He's a clergyman. So that's interesting because he's asking Alfred all about where's his stance with the church and stuff. It's like, oh no, I'm a good church going boy. But then the whole thing about being in the army and stuff like that. And her dad saying some super messed up stuff about she's always been obsessed with murder and death. And the fact of the matter is women being ravished and then being saved by some young strapping hero. And basically he's just trying to say that basically the only fascination my daughter has with you, she isn't in love with you. If she is, she's only in love with the animal that's in you. But he's like, there's no animal in me. It's like, there's an animal in everyone, son. And kind of saying basically she's a woman from a very high class family, and it's your parents, your dad's a butler, the fact that you come from a family of servants, and you're basically the whole thing of you come from two different worlds, it'll never work out type of situation. And he has to be such an asshole about it. And it's and if she does go out with you, then she's I'll disinherit her. And it's holy crap. Because basically saying that it would never work out because, nothing but misery awaits in that relationship. And it's you claim to be a clergyman, but you're such a piece of crap. That's, to be fair, this is back then, so things have changed, sure, but it's just he's such an asshole. And even Esme was like, oh yeah, I told you, my dad was going to be like that. What was interesting, though, is I thought it was kind of interesting because, you came to him after the fact because you already proposed, but I guess it's fine because he probably thought hey, it's okay. As long as I got his blessings in general, it's fine. So proposing, I guess ahead of time, it's fine as long as you get the blessing in general. I feel generally you want to go the other way around, but whatever the case may be. And Esme's not too happy about what her dad said either. The fact is, it's he really said that, I'm into revenge and stuff like that. The fact is, it's what did your dad, because even Alfred being whoa, steady on, calm down, that's your dad, don't talk about him like that. Because for her, it pissed her off. It's the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter about the money, because I've told him for years to, stuff his money. But for Alfred, it's but that's your future. And she's my future includes you. But for him, he's so down on himself that he doesn't believe he can give her a good enough future. That basically everything her dad said was true, because saying because he's a soldier, and soldiers it has a tendency, the army has a tendency to harden you and kind of, what was it he said exactly, brutalize you, which Alfred's yes, it can do that, but he's I also believe people can change, and that's what I'm gonna do, hopefully with Esme's help, but that wasn't enough, And and her dad was just so smug afterwards, just going back to his tea and everything after that. It's just ooh, which Alfred just punched you in the face. Obviously not the respectable thing to do, but in one of those, in that moment, you're kind of ooh, you have such a punchable face. But, and you feel bad for him, and but Esme, because when Alfred's why do you have such an issue? When Alfred says, "What do you have such an issue with your dad?" Esme was kind of he did nothing wrong, but it's I feel yeah, there's definitely a story there that she's not really touching on. But basically, he got pissed and said, "Fuck my dad and fuck you, Alfred," for basically this whole situation, and he doesn't go chasing after her, which. Kind of getting back to it, he meets up with Martha Kane, who's offering him a job. You just have to be a driver, not telling him that many details and stuff like that. I was okay. And even he from the beginning was kind of yeah, this is kind of a bit of shady job, but I'll take it. And I was about to say, I almost forgot about the whole Baza and Dave situation this episode. I'll go ahead and talk about it. That is kind of interesting because we all can tell Dave is literally on the verge of kind of just shit is just falling apart for Dave because like everyone handles what they went through differently. Like it seems like Alfred and Baza have it together, but they're struggling. I mean, Baza, we haven't seen him struggle at all, but that doesn't mean he's not. You know, we've seen little tidbits with Alfred, but not a lot. Like the most we've seen is like obviously because Dave's trying to drown himself in alcohol, so that's his way to kind of deal with his demons. But he's at that game with Baza, the card game, and he's just like, oh, spot me 5, and the dude Phil puts a gun in his face, well, pulls a gun out, but then he's like, oh, no, go ahead. He wouldn't do anything even if I was right there in front of him titty fucking his mom or something like that. It's like, Jesus, Dave. And the gun's to Dave's head, and he's like, nah, it's all good. His name Phil. He's like, I'm gonna call you Archie. Come on, we're pals, right? Shakes his hand, tosses him the gun. He grabs the gun goes off and kills him. And all Dave has to say for himself, sorry. It's like, you're sorry? You, what? And Baza got tired of it. He's like, dude, I'm tired of always trying. You need to get some help. You're drinking all the time. Like, you're not dealing with your issues. And, you know, obviously Baza's kind of pissed at him, saying, like, if you're going to die, don't do it don't basically go off somewhere and do it quickly and don't make us watch. But obviously for Dave, it's like, I'm not trying to die. I don't want to die, but, you know, I got to pass the time. And it's like, essentially, like, he doesn't want to die, but like basically say I'm gonna have to go find some way to pass the time through life because he doesn't plan on offing himself, but this is the only way he can bring himself to pass time because any other moment it's like he's probably drowning in his own thoughts and stuff like that, you know, and it's sad to kind of see him so broken down like that. And even though Baza kind of walked away, he came back as like, what, you can't walk on your own, and goes back to help him because no matter how pissed he is under the circumstances, that's still his brother. It's like through thick and thin, we're you know, I've got your back, friend, you know, that type of thing. So I thought that was kind of a nice way. And, you know, we get a little tidbits of it kind of later on where we see, like, Dave isn't as drunk. So it looks like that might be something we see is him more put together. So I think that'd be kind of pretty neat. Because I even love when Alfred asked him what went down. They were like, yep, it's an ordinary day, even though they had to help dispose of a body. That was a whole situation. So there's that. Like I said, kind of went on a tangent. Well, not really a tangent, but nevertheless, circling back to the main plot of the episode. Turns out, you know, Alfred's asking her questions like, "Oh, do you know Thomas Wayne?" It's like she's like, "No, I don't know Thomas," and it's just like, okay. So it turns out this is about a very smart dude named Ian. Ian and Sam are lovers, and Sam is being arrested because he was found out as being gay. I was like, right, I didn't know it was a crime. Well, I know in some places, sadly, it is, but I didn't know, like, I guess even back then, like, oh, being, like, found. I mean, it seems like it was all pretenses anyway, but the fact is that's what they could arrest him on. And apparently, the way Martha was saying, it's like, oh, they were going to cut off his balls. It's like, Jesus. I guess God, that's fucking horrible. And so you have, you know, I love Martha being like, I'll pretend to be a lawyer, but you're not a lawyer. It's like, yeah, but all I have to do is walk in with a suitcase and like an asshole, like all lawyers. So she had the proper paperwork and stuff like that, threatening to go to the chancery if they don't release Ian, because this is about Ian's computer. The fact of the matter is they were going to lock him up. He's going to kind of be a slave to the system and basically not be able to get his work out there, essentially. So that's kind of like the big thing. Obviously, the Raven Society shows up because it turns out, which completely and utterly surprised me, Martha is part of the No Name League. It's like, wait, what? Like, because once again, I brought this up in the first episode when I talked about Martha and Thomas. Like, I only know about this because other people had pointed it out to me. But apparently, the Waynes and the Kanes typically don't get along. Like, there's actually a family feud, so their relationship is kind of a Romeo and Juliet type of thing, which that is kind of crazy to think about when you think about things later on. But I'll get to that eventually. But it's like, I'm wondering, are they changing anything about her background in this? I mean, who knows? Maybe a lot of this is stuff they're kind of making up on their own. Like, they might be pulling some of the stuff that... Because I don't know how flushed out Martha, Thomas, or even Alfred's past really is. I feel like if anyone's past is probably flushed out, it'd be Alfred's. But who knows? Maybe Bruce has to cross paths with stuff in the comic books based on his dad and mom's past. So, but it's just interesting to know that, like, oh, his mom worked with the No Name League. And it's okay. But for her, she's like, I work for a group who leases me out, and if that involves working with different groups like the No Names, then so, because like Alfred's like, the way you've got everything set up, the way you are, like I would have assumed at best like maybe CIA, especially, but it's like you're working with the No Name League, but you're also an American. That's what kind of confuses him with the whole thing, especially what the No Names represent. So it's like, because even Alfred later on is like, I don't know whether she works for the No Name League or she's a CIA agent or both. Maybe. And like being good with this group might be a means to an end. I don't know. So there's that whole situation. I love that whole situation of like them blowing up the transformer so the plane can't land to come get the computer. So they're kind of stuck, and there's armed gunmen, and obviously Martha's like, we can't give them Ian. So you have Alfred playing the only card he can. It's like, oh, if you don't get out of here, I will kill Ian, and Martha, my employer, is going to smash that computer. And so the fact is, it's going to be a lose-lose situation. But I love what they end up doing. They end up like, using the gas from the truck, lighting it up, and giving the plane a light for them to find the runway. Ian and the computer get on board, and Sam was going to stay behind, but he ends up falling. Because as we can heard from the conversation, it's like, oh, like Ian, the disgrace that you've brought to Sam's family. He comes from a good family, so it's kind of like, yeah, with this whole situation, like, he probably doesn't have much keeping him here. So it's like, why not go off and be with the man you love, type of thing. So I just thought that was kind of interesting, like how that whole situation was handled, especially because it's like, yeah, because the computers are a new technology. Because for him, it's like, oh my god, this thing, she was able to compute pi to the 10th decimal all by its own. So like, I guess these are like the very early stages. I guess if you maybe know stuff about history, probably combination of UK history and probably American history, that meeting right there will probably be heavily significant. There might be some historic value in that. I'm sure there's a lot of historic value in this, probably, that maybe a lot of it's lost on me because I'm not British. I mean, I know they make references to stuff. I'm like, that probably is a real thing that's being mentioned, but because I don't know European history like that, it kind of goes over my head, that type of thing. So. But Alfred has decided that he's going to continue working with Martha, just promising that he'll do some driving, be basically a bodyguard and stuff, but no guns, and she doesn't hide stuff from him anymore. So, beginning of a beautiful partnership. Other interesting things to kind of dabble in. Like I said, I'm blurring like so many lines, so I do apologize. I'd actually forgotten to talk about it too, like, Alfred's parents, well, his dad in particular, the way Alfred kind of makes it seems like his dad not only beat him, but beat his mom too. He was like, oh, like, yeah, I deserve discipline. What about mom? I'm like, oh, holy shit. So I guess, it's probably one of those things where it's like, I mean, it's not an excuse, but I'm guessing it's because that thing of like, it's part of the times. The fact is that Alfred just let it go, but he let it go only for his mom's sake. If his mom wasn't there, I mean, because his dad's like, because even his dad's reiterating some of the stuff that Esme's dad did about like, oh, the fact of the matter is you're not good enough for her. Oh, don't think that, if you kind of do better in your business and stuff like that, then you'll be worthy of her. And he's like, no, didn't even cross my mind, which I think was the whole point that Alfred was kind of aiming towards. But he's like, good, basically saying there's too much different. West End is West End, East is East, there's no in between, there's no muddying up that area essentially. So I was like, that would shit him the same, and that pissed Alfred off, because it's like his dad is just saying like, oh, he hasn't changed, which is kind of like interesting to say, considering I think he has changed so much because of his experience. Actually, kind of tying into that, I thought it was kind of interesting where Martha had brought up the point of like, oh yeah, she thought Alfred was so interesting because like, you're a soldier, you don't like guns and stuff like that. He's like, you must not have met many soldiers. She's like, my dad was in the army as well, and he was like, oh, did he tell you about the nightmares? And she's like, no, he said he slept like a baby. And then he was lying to you. And I think that kind of put things in perspective for Martha, that a lot of people, that's points in their lives a lot of military people don't want to talk about. They don't want to be, it's hard enough living with it, but I'm sure it's even harder to actually talk about it, But nevertheless, getting back to what I was saying, it's just him and his dad, like, having issues like that, and he ended up apologizing, and you could tell like he did it kind of gritting his teeth. But nevertheless, getting back to what I was bringing up before, Sykes and her sister. Now that's an interesting situation. For one, finding out that Peggy's a dominatrix of sorts. That's really interesting. And it's like, oh yeah, it's like, oh mate, because it wasn't just the husband, it seemed like the wife was too, because she has her in like her bra and panties. So it's like, oh, you've got her, oh, cooking you food. And it's like, oh, and the dude, well, she calls him Lulu. It's like, oh yeah, like he's like, oh yes, mistress and stuff. And so it's like, okay, that's interesting. You're living in someone else's house. Apparently they were living there for like a month, because now Sykes has got different hair, and I love it. I thought, I was like, is Sykes kind of not just, she talks about, oh, the fact that she does have a friend, and that's Esme. It's like, And I love that her sister's like the quote of this episode is "you daft bitch." I love that she constantly calls her that just because it's like even she can recognize, okay, sis, you're a little crazy because you think Esme wants to be with you. It's like, no, she likes me. It's like you kidnapped her and held her hostage. Yeah, but the fact of the matter is she also thinks you're dead. It's like, yeah, but it's romantic, isn't it? Me coming back from the dead, my new look and everything. It's like, you are seriously crazy. And I like it. I wasn't expecting that. I also love that, like, the whole thing of, like, it turned into a whole thing of them fighting, throwing stuff at each other, strangling each other. It's like, that's typical thing when your sister smashes you in the face with the radio and then you start choking her. Sisterly love. Yeah, it's nothing better. It's like, holy crap. They definitely, we could tell Sykes, she's dysfunctional in her own right, but it's not like her sister's any better. You can tell her sister's just as dysfunctional too, so that's interesting. She is heading back to London because I was like, no, I gotta meet up with Esme. That's her main reason. It's kind of interesting. It's like, well, you're supposed to be dead and you're willing to go back to London just for Esme. I think that shows you just how obsessed she is, which that's going to definitely be interesting. I'll get to that soon enough. But the next job with Martha, which now Martha has been introduced to Thomas because Thomas is technically her new boss, which is interesting because like Martha's like, okay, like I love that line of like, is that supposed to mean like she's from North Carolina? She makes reference to like a Marine reserve that she trained at, but I don't, like Fort Benning, I don't know where that is. But like he was like, oh, go demons, and she's like devils, and I'm like, oh yeah, because he references Duke. I'm like, oh, whoa, is Martha from North Carolina? Okay. Interesting. Nevertheless, I love that she brings up, it's like, oh yeah, you're from Gotham. She's like, is that place really as scary as they say? And he's like, nah, it's safe and getting safer. I audibly laughed out loud. I was like, that's fucking hilarious that you say that. And he's talking about the fact is it's going to be the new Zurich of the East and stuff like that. I'm like, wow. Which is funny. Let's not forget, people behind this show also made Gotham, which, there's that. There's that. Just Gotham in itself, just the TV show, kind of give you reference of even early days. Gotham, obviously the show is its own continuity, but still, it's just, they had to add that line in there just because of that. But it's funny just to think, because they made that show and you just see how wild and crazy Gotham is. But even just knowing Batman lore in general, you know how crazy Gotham is. Him even being like, 20 years. It's like, once again, it's fucking hilarious that came out of his mouth. It's meant to be. It's like, dude, you poor deluded bastard to think Gotham will ever be, sadly, not the scary place that it is. But nevertheless, I just thought that was interesting. But it is interesting, too, that it seems like the No Name League has taken an interest in Alfred. I wonder why. Because it's like, okay, well, if he says no, just offer him more money because they believe he's worth it. It's interesting because Thomas himself didn't say, like, I believe he's worth it, just that the No Name League believes that he's worth it. So, I thought that was interesting. Let's not also forget Aziz. How the hell does he know as much as he does? I mean, I guess that just shows he's really good at his job, but he brings up the fact is like, I know you're working with the No Name League. You're working for Martha Kane, who's working for Thomas Wayne. It's like, you even know Martha's name. It's like, how the hell do you know what you know? To be fair, he's connected to the Prime Minister and everything, so I guess that's, because he was there during the whole what's-his-face situation, Harwood. I didn't even talk about that. That poor bastard got his nose sliced off and his feet. It's like, Jesus. I thought the barber was just going to slice his face up. Wasn't expecting him to cut off his nose and his feet. Did I say legs before? I meant feet. If I, regardless, it was just like, holy crap. But for Aziz to be like, the Queen is kind of taking an interest in you, which is interesting. You're like, right, he did meet the Queen in the first episode, but it's like, the fact is work with her, not against her, because if you do, the fact of the matter is you're working with essentially like, radical extremist group, and it's like, not only you, but your boys Dave and Basil are going to get hung as well, so that's kind of interesting. Even bringing up Esme of like, does she know about what you're up to and stuff, kind of like that. It's like, why? It's like, I don't know, just curious. Which is like, obviously, Alfred's supposed to not be taking like too dangerous of jobs, but also at the same time, he's also working with not only just a dangerous situation, but he's also working with a dangerous group and the problems that could be. Nevertheless, the job is to find out the new leader of the Raven Society. Now that turned into a special event. There was like, what was that thing that they found the dude. He was dead. He was supposed to give them the information. Also, I should note, I couldn't help but think it the entire time. man, is Alfred cheeky as hell. And I like that they make a point to tell you, like, oh, why he's cheeky as hell, too. Essentially, it's just interesting because, like, he makes jokes all the time, but the reason is because it's like, oh, my buddy's Spanish, which we constantly get cutbacks to, like, someone he was in the army with who's sadly dead. The fact is, like, life is either a comedy or a tragedy. You basically have to choose, and he'd rather look at life as, he'd rather laugh. So that's why he kind of takes things as a joke, because that everyone has their defense mechanism. They kind of deal with stressful and crazy situations. It seems like that's his. I even love it being like, she's got the gun and everything, and he's like, she's like, don't worry, the safety's on. He's like, we had a buddy named Robo. Every time his name comes up, everyone laughs because the last words out of his mouth was, the safety's on. So that was interesting. It's like, okay, that story in itself speaks volumes. And she was like, I get the point. It was interesting, kind of, like I said, further examples of Alfred being kind of cheeky is the whole thing of like, well, we have two choices. Like well, sooner or later they'll find their way to us, so we can either capture someone and, get them for information, or they'll capture us and take us straight to their leader. So it's kind of a win-win situation. And she's like, are you trying to take the piss out of me? He's like, well, what was it? I think he said it was like, I'm taking a mickey out of you. I'd never take the piss out of a client. She's like, yeah, I'm just trying to catch up with, like, customs and just like the way people talk here, so it was just kind of an interesting little thing. Also, like, what was it, the maypole? It's like, oh yeah, it's for sex orgies. She's like, you've got to be kidding me. And he's like, no, the country people out here, basically, like, country people out here are pretty damn wild. They're kind of set in their own ways. Then there's the whole darkness, tea room situation, darkness. That was interesting. I also love, like, the conversation they have about Esme, because it's like, oh, because Alfred's like, oh, I'm not good enough for her, and Martha's like, oh, she probably thinks the same thing, and he's like, no, she doesn't. It's like, he's like, women know their worth. It's up to a man to find out. And she's like, oh, look at you. You're an old-fashioned sexist. And he's like, I don't know what that is, but, I'm a, it doesn't sound good from the sound of it, but, I'm a one-woman kind of guy. And then Martha laughed, which I'm like, it is kind of adorable how naive you are that you don't know what sexist means. But still, I thought that was kind of a nice scene and everything, And then the whole, oh, yeah, and darkness comes out with her shotgun, and it accidentally goes off, spraying blood, killing the old lady, which is interesting. We've got literally like back-to-back episodes with that happening. Like, obviously the Phil situation now, Madame Darkness's situation, and Martha getting covered in blood, and Alfred. This must be like, because she even talked, like I said, she had talked about the fact that she had gone through some training and stuff like that. That was what I was thinking of. I thought was kind of interesting. It's like, okay, what happens when shit hits the fan? It's like, well, turn the fan off or get behind something that's shit-proof, was kind of Alfred's thought process. I thought was kind of interesting. But I don't, because she's been through like some Marine Reserve training, yeah, but I think it's still like, this is kind of like her first instances of like real world training and stuff like that. So that getting covered in blood, it bothered her that much. Like, Alfred kind of wipes it away. Yeah, it's kind of bothering, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, it's nothing new. So them managing to escape the people after them and everything. He wants to simply take her to the doctor, but she's kind of like, I can walk, I can do this, like. And it turns out the doctor she goes to, like, I figured something out when she wakes up and the doctor's like, oh yeah, you so much blood loss. Oh, you lost so much blood. I'm like, her wound was like, I was like, not unless her wound would just stay, but it was tied off, so she couldn't have like bled like crazy. I was like, no, you injected her and knocked her out. I was like, in that moment, I was like, dear old Francis, you are the Raven Society leader, aren't you? I even love like them trying to get, oh right, the people, like Alfred's turning himself in, and the dude's like beating him up for killing. It's like, oh, this is what you get for killing a sweet old, Darkness. Like, she was such a nice old lady. How could you do this to her? He's like, yeah, I'm sorry about that, kind of getting hit. He's like, if you don't stop that. He's like, or else, or what? You killed her. How would you like it if I shot your mom? And he's like, all right, that's enough of that. Headbutts him. And then he's all right, for fuck's sake. Like, the fact of the matter is, I'm trying to do business here. All right, business. So fuck off and just come on and take me to your governor. And it's like, all right, so you're the Raven Society. He's blindfolded and everything. He's like, all right, sorry, I can't give you this information. He's like, I'm not trying to be difficult or anything. Just, following orders, sir. And the guy comes in. He's like, okay, I'm the leader. It's like, no, you're not, because I can see your shoes. You're third rank, at the top at best, so. Then Martha's dealing with everything. Oh, that Tanya situation was so morbid, because it's also because Frances is just so kind of like nice and smooth and motherly to a certain extent. She just seems like a nice lady, and he is like, oh, here's Tanya. We only call her Tanya because she looks like she's Russian. Well, she tried to kill us, but we didn't know her name, so we're keeping her head in this jar to keep it, fresh enough, because, decency and all that. She deserves to, her family deserves to be able to bury her, which is like, oh, that's nice and decent of you. I mean, still morbid as hell, but I mean, at least you have a decent reason behind it. So it's like, Martha, tell us your name. So doesn't your family deserve know your name? And it's like, oh yeah. So Martha tells her everything. I even love it too when they bring Alfred in, and it's like Francis, I'm the leader of the Raven Society. And he's like, what? A woman? Get out of here. Now, no wonder you're such a secret. And you have Martha being like, stop being such a smart ass. I love it. But luckily they were able to kind of get away, and they were like, hey, we're not here to kill you. We're the Raven Society. I mean, the No Name League isn't about the torture and killing. It's like, we came here just to get your name, not to kill you. And then, but you had, for instance, being like, oh, you're kind of naive, because I think Martha doesn't really know the group that she's with necessarily. I mean, who knows? Like, the fact is, it's like, because that's why I was kind of caught off guard, because I was like, oh, you're here to kill her? Because, like, that's what Francis was saying, but they're here just to get your name. But it's like, maybe they are here to kill you. Maybe just, like, Martha never told Alfred that, but I would think, like, no more secrets between them and everything. But it's like, no, that wasn't their plan. But I think it's supposed to represent the fact is of, like, oh, yeah, like, maybe the No Name League has other means of going about this thing. Maybe they plan on going after some family of hers to kind of force her to do what they want her to. I don't know. It's very interesting, because I even love it. Once again, the killing Miss Darkness, they keep using that against Alfred. Alfred's like, how many, almost like, okay, I'm sorry about that. It was an accident, because she's like, oh, rather you do it in front of me. He's like, what do you think, I'm a savage or something? What the hell are you talking about? No. I love that. That constantly kept getting thrown in his face. It's like, it was literally an accident. For one, he didn't even defend himself, but it's like, the lady came rushing at him with a shotgun. There was a struggle over it, and she died. But that's interesting. So what also was interesting was the whole conversation between Martha and Alfred later on, because, she says that Alfred kind of enjoys this whole situation being so close to death. He's like, nah, because I think there is some part of him, that feels that way. All this danger and stuff is kind of exciting. That's how I kind of look at it. As potentially he might look at it, but I was wondering about that. I was like, oh, him and Martha are getting a little too damn cozy. I was like, you don't think? Nah, that'd be weird. And then they kiss. Like, I'm like, oh my god, this is weird. Because it's like, later on in life he's going to work for her, and it's going to be awkward. I mean, doesn't mean anything. I mean, maybe something did happen between them. That have to be weird. Because it's like Alfred, it's kind of like a dad to Bruce. It's like, at one point in time I made out with your mom. I'm thinking about it too much, but they had to have done that just to do that. Like, holy crap, to get you thinking about that. It's like, oh man, that's crazy. I mean, because obviously it's not going to be a straight shot to Martha and Thomas, especially because they work together. They haven't spent enough time together anyway, but still, it's interesting. Like I said, I wasn't expecting her storyline to be this, like, under these circumstances and whatnot. Like, it seems like it wasn't just Thomas kind of mixed up in, like, kind of some secrecy. Like, it's usually him, and Martha kind of gets wrapped in it as well, but it seems like in this, her thing is potentially her own thing, even though hers and Thomas's things are the same thing, which is weird I'm saying it like that. It seems like they both have their own different reasons for being here, because they even had that whole conversation about why they're doing this. So it's like, yeah, they both have their own reasons for it. Doesn't seem like it's necessarily the same reason. What those reasons are, hopefully we kind of find out later on in the season, but regardless. I didn't even talk about it, but Alfred, kind of re-proposed to Esme. It's like, and like I said, opened up about the fact is that he was scared, because for him it's like, Esme is so able to just, not afraid to kind of basically throw everything to decide and kind of go out and do things on her own. Because for him, it's like this whole relationship, he was scared because for him, it's like there is an animal in him and he's afraid that that's all there is, because this animal has kept him alive since he was 16 years old. It got him through battle. It paid the rent. So he's afraid that there's nothing more to him except for that. But, I think Esme kind of makes him feel like, no, there can be and is more to me, so... Luckily, she kind of is willing to give him, another chance. And it's like, oh, we're going to move into this place together. I mean, it's your place, but obviously, if you want me to move in here and live with you, I can be convinced. Even leaving her, and that's what I was thinking. Like, also, like, the next episode is like you leave her in your parents' care, staying with your dad and your mom, and then you're asking, and it's like, oh, it's like you be nice to her, essentially, telling that to his dad, and Esme asking Alfred's dad to like help plan the wedding and all that. And I love his mom didn't take it so well. She's like, oh, and he's like, oh, stop sulking. She's like, I'm not sulking. Don't take that tone with me. And so like Esme's like, I'm sorry. Will you help out with the wedding too? And she gets so happy. I was like, oh, it is kind of interesting that, I guess it makes sense, but it's just interesting that, the first person she went to was Alfred's dad. But then you have the thing at the end, which is kind of like, oh boy. Like when she was there alone, it was like someone going towards the door. I'm like, okay, it's gotta be Sykes. She found a way there. I thought that's what the reveal was going to be, but it turned out not to be. Whoever it was seemed like they had a key to the place too, which was interesting, but that might have just been them picking the lock. But whoever it was started strangling Esme, and Alfred's on his way, but he gets there too late. What's interesting too is like it wasn't just he was just strangled. It's like there's blood on the floor. So the question then becomes: is she dead? Is she like she might be severely injured, but maybe she's alive. Maybe she suffered some head trauma, or maybe she is dead. I don't know. I was like, Jesus, I wasn't expecting that story to turn out that way. Hopefully, like I said, she's alive, which I'm sure Alfred's going to feel even guiltier because it's like, I wasn't there, plus I kissed Martha, and I'm sure that's going to be a whole complicated mess in itself, but, like I said, I assume, but it's just like, because last time we saw she was just being strangled, but there was blood on the floor. I'm assuming it was like some Raven Society stuff just because, the fact of the matter is, you made yourself known, to them, so this is their way to retaliate. That's the only explanation I have. Because like I said, I was almost halfway expecting Sykes to show up and kill the person that was hurting her just because she's obsessed with Esme. That's why I'm kind of like, they might not get rid of Esme. Like, I don't think she's dead. Like I said, I think she might just still be alive. Potentially, we'll see in the next episode, but just because of the whole Sykes storyline makes me think Esme's going to be sticking around. But we'll see. Because also it'd just be shitty too, like they just got back together and continuing. She literally went to Alfred's parents to plan her wedding and everything and then murdered. It's like, is it impossible? No, I would just hope it wouldn't, because that would suck so much. And there's also the whole Harwood situation. Once again, he's out on the streets. That dude that's like, oh no, I'm looking after him is kind of treating him like a pet and whatnot. It's like, whatever the hell that storyline ends up being. Like, I guess it's supposed to be kind of a thing of like, I'm still alive, but I'm a rise back up type of situation. Because he even made that remark of like, for every drop of blood he spills from me, he will have to pay, or something like that. The Prime Minister will. So I'm like, is that supposed to be like the Raven Society's going to do that, or is he going to rise back up like the Phoenix from the ashes and get his revenge? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I'm very interested to see where all of this ultimately ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Preacher. A lot of very interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First of all, let's start off with everything related to Jesse. I was wondering about that whole Dusade situation, like were we ever going to get back to that? But it's like, Jesse ends up there, and it is a terrible place, because that kid, in fact, is, because the first dude that walks up to Jesse is like, oh hey, and he's like, oh yeah, like that boy, like the fact is that he's booked or whatever, and Jesse was like, I was hoping you weren't going to say something like that, and then you did, and Jesse ended up knocking him out for it. Goes up there, rescues a kid, and he's like, you're the one that's in trouble. He's like, actually, it's you. Despite being in a third world country, I'm getting $35 an hour. You're the one that's really kind of screwed over. And Jesse's like, okay. And I love the kid giving him the boots back. And it's like, okay, there's a hallway full of people trying to stop him. And I think this speaks volumes about who Jesse is too. Jesse at any point in time could have just used the word to be like, oh, get out of the way. could even use the word to tell them to kill themselves or whatever. Because the fact of the matter is, he ends up basically killing everyone anyway. But the fact is, he did it with his bare hands. I think it's just because that shows you who Jesse is. Just kind of like a little, how much of a bit of a bad guy Jesse is. But I mean, I'm sure he didn't feel any guilt over it because it's like, well, you're trying to stop me, but you're all here, partaking in all this. So you're the worst kind of perverts. So, world's kind of better off without you type of thing. And I love just cinematically how that was shot and everything and just full on brawl. I love when you get to see, because you like Jesse can easily handle himself in a fight, and that's just so impressive, and that's what I love about it. And just like gives him a hallway full of people to kick their asses. You even saw him at one point, he threw and hung one dude on a light bulb, like the light bulb goes out, and I even love how that was shot, where it's like the camera's far back and it looks like the top of the screens is black, so all you can see is the hallway. I just loved how that was filmed, and it's just like at one point you just see him slam the dude against the wall, and the light goes out, and the body's just hanging there. It's like, Jesus. At one point, he gets that dude's gun, which I love that guy's trying to shoot Jesse, but he just shoots the two guys in front of him just to get to Jesse. Jesse takes the gun, bam, 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 starts shooting everybody, gets one dude's knife, and just starts slicing. It's like, it's mad freaking impressive. Sadly, at the end of the day, though, it had a depressing ass ending because the kid he tried to save, Jesse walks in there, he has a headshot and the thing is, it most likely came about because, let's not forget, Jesse pointed the gun in that direction and fired at like a guy in that direction. So it was actually him that fired the shot that ended up killing the kid. Because even when Jesse tries to do good, he ends up doing a lot of bad, Because, I mean, and I think that's, once again, that's why Genesis chose him, because of the duality that exists inside of Jesse. He just happens to have that right percentage of good and evil representing, Genesis' nature as well. And it's kind of interesting that, it's like that very nature is what Jesse struggles with so hard, because doing bad stuff comes so easy. I mean, when you look at his family, especially his mom's side of things, and his mom being the exception, but like his grandma and his uncles, it's like, yeah, you can definitely see like how that evil kind of comes out. But obviously he has a more good nature side of it that comes from both his mom and his dad, those things being instilled. Because like I said, he had the best of intention, like, oh, I'm going to save this kid from these terrible people. And him, once again, he could have done it a simple way of using the word of God, but he didn't. But because he chose to handle things the way he did, because I think you can say to a certain extent, Jesse enjoyed doing things that way, that because of that nature inside of him, that kid ended up ultimately dying because of it. And they end up leaving. I mean, not before he bashes that dude's head in and then curb stomps it. It's like, Jesus. Gets him and the pilot out of there, tells the pilot, forget everything you saw. At the airport, lo and behold, who's there waiting? Hitler himself. It's like, of course I know who you are. I love Jesse doesn't even question it. I mean, the weird, crazy thing about it in this world is kind of like everyone just goes with the punches. It's just kind of like, people might have some like reservations in the beginning, but they just kind of go, this is the world of Preacher. Things are the way they are. It's like, oh, Hitler's here? Who cares? I've come across angels, unkillable, unstoppable cowboy from hell. I have the powers I have, God, running around on Earth. It's not that big of a deal. So it's like, if Hitler's here, Hitler's here. It's also explaining like, hey, I'm kind of the new head honcho of hell. Can't wait to meet you in hell, which Jesse was like, I'm not going to hell. He's like, the fact is, you have Hitler being like, oh, the terrible shit you done, you're not going to hell. It's like, really? Hitler's telling you that? That's got to be an extra stab in the gut of just like, Hitler's calling me bad? That speaks volumes. But I guess it takes terrible to recognize terrible. It's so interesting because it's like, oh, your parents must be so proud of you being the head of hell or whatever. Now he's like, oh yeah, that's when they're not being tortured by me, I'm having them like flayed and whipped and stuff like that. It's like, Jesus. The way he made it sounded almost like the same whip that Sydney was using on the cowboy last season when she like whipped his back raw to the like meat and bones, that thing. So I'm assuming it's that, but nevertheless. There's also this whole thing of like, I'm wondering, like, because let's not forget, his grandma made that deal with Satan, where it's like, okay, you'll get Jesse's soul when he dies. So that deal didn't go away. That was still kind of in play even before Jesse ended up killing her last season. But I think the thing is, like, because I would think now that Satan's dead too, the deal is done. But if I remember correctly, I could be mistaken, but wasn't that the paper that was right in front of Hitler at the end of season 3 was the whole contract about Jesse? So I guess, like, maybe, he still has that. Maybe he put that in, or maybe Satan already got that stamped and approved, or maybe the moment the deal was made, there's no getting rid of it. That contract is set in stone no matter what. Or maybe Hitler's the one that put it through, or maybe Hitler didn't. I don't know. The fact is he didn't throw that in Jesse's face makes me wonder, you know? So maybe like Satan didn't have a chance to stamp the deal. So maybe that's supposed to be what that represents. I don't know. Either way, I think that's another thing too. Jesse's got like, you know, this battle for his soul and everything about where everything's going to be. I mean, that's the question. Is he going to heaven? Is he going to hell? It's hard to say. But it's like, oh, God's not going to let you find him, which is true because God's going through everything. That's so interesting, too. That's what I'm curious about, that whole situation with God being there. Is that supposed to be like, oh, because God is a pervert in the show because of the whole man dog? I mean, he was dressed up like man dog. So not unless that's just, I mean, it seems like that might just kind of be his everyday attire when he's in certain places. I mean, I didn't even think about that because when he was at the Grail in episode 1, it was like, this season, he was in regular clothes, if I remember correctly. So I guess because he doesn't want to show up in his, pervert gear, because that's just going to be weird and awkward around the Grail. I mean, it's not like they can judge or say anything because you're God, but you get what I'm saying. So I'm curious, is that supposed to represent the fact he was there, or was he doing his thing of like, oh, I'm always watching? Especially because obviously Satan and God took a big interest in Jesse. They've always had an eye on him. Like as we last season flashback, to him when he was younger around his grandma, like we saw that they were both nearby watching, seeing, I guess, where his nature of his soul will take him. And the fact is, because of that, like it didn't hit me till now, just like how deep that runs, that duality that is his soul. Why, something like Genesis chose him because of the balance of his soul. The fact is, both God and Satan have taken an interest in him like that. It just, the duality of it all kind of runs super deep around Jesse like that, which is just so fascinating. So I am curious to see how that all plays out. I'm curious, is that also God messing with his head? Like at the end of the last episode, he saw Cassidy. At the end of this one, he saw Tulip being like, you didn't even say goodbye. But there's also that screen that flashes on being like, oh yeah, basically Jesse's a wanted man. I think that's God doing that to mess with his head. But also the Grail is hunting him down like that, because I'm sure that's all part of God's plan, because God's trying to make sure that Jesse doesn't catch up to him. So he's doing a lot of divine intervention to make sure it happens. But I think he wants Jesse to know, like, oh yeah, you're not coming after me because, oh, you're wanted for everything that went down. I mean, basically that whole Desaad situation, once again, it's like, and it's something Eugene constantly brings up throughout this episode, which we'll get to, but it's like all of it's part of God's plan, even the more twisted aspects of everything there. Once again, because we saw it at the end of last episode, of just like everything mapped out, like the model of the airplane that Jesse's on and everything, the church. It's just like from the very beginning, this has all been planned out. Might have been planned out millennia in advance, and it's just up till now that everything's kind of playing out, God's plan at the end of the day, whatever it turns out to, be. So I just think that's kind of fascinating. And since I brought him up, let's go down to Eugene route. I love that Eugene's talking to the Saint and whatnot, and he's like, oh, do you want to get a car or something? It'd be faster, which is funny because literally all last season, the Saint, Hitler, and Eugene were literally walking everywhere. So I love that you're kind of like, yeah, I mean, we could kind of get a car or whatever. So they end up stopping for food. And I love that Eugene asked the important questions. 1, do you eat? 2, do you go potty? Things we've never gotten answered. I would assume not, because he's already dead, but no, I'm about to say no, because Eugene was alive, so his situation is a little different. So I was about to say that could be explaining why, but it's like, why is the cowboy not like that? But it's like, well, because he's already dead, so maybe things kind of work differently. I mean, I assume Hitler eats. I mean, we haven't seen Hitler eat since he's been back, have we? We've seen, yeah, I don't think so. It makes you wonder about that stuff. Maybe things work a little differently for the dead, but regardless. But what's really interesting is finding out Eugene's thoughts of, once again, of like him being so like, oh, it's all part of God's plan. The fact of the matter is him going to hell, leaving the cowboy going to hell, and then meeting each other. Like all this was kind of planned out. He's even asking him, like, when he meets up with Jesse, what he's going to do. It's like, well, because, Jesse sent him to hell. But I'm actually surprised by Eugene's response of him being like, because I assumed him to be super pissed at Jesse for sending him to hell. But I think when it's all said and done, when he meets up with Jesse again, I think he's going to be happy, because for him, it's like, oh my God, someone from my town is still alive. I mean, he was super excited to run into Tulip again. So I think if the situation comes, I think he'll be happy. I mean, he might be a little irritated, but I think he just wants an apology from Jesse for sending him to hell and everything, other than, But what's interesting is the cowboy was like, kills your entire family and then gets sent to hell. I wonder, is he talking about God? Because remember, Sydney had talked about, well, I think Sydney and Satan had basically pointed out the fact is that was kind of all God's thing. Like, even God being the one behind the whole crows pecking out the eyes, which that seems like that might be all part of a plan to put the saint where he is right now. I guess because he needed the saint to be an obstacle in Jesse's way. I think that's particularly how this whole thing is set up. He needed to create a situation where an unstoppable killing machine, essentially a Terminator, would exist that would stop Jesse, because obviously the word doesn't work against him. He's literally the one thing in the universe that the word won't work on, because he doesn't have a soul, so that's interesting. So I'm curious. I mean, even his soul being destroyed was probably part of that play as well. So that's what I'm assuming. That, like I said, Eugene isn't wrong. That this is all part of the play, all the plan. Even that scene with Eugene in the bathroom and the guy's like, "Oh yeah, put your mouth up to it," and Eugene stupidly does. I'm like, "Oh, Eugene, don't!" But he's naive and innocent. But it's like the guy's like, "Oh God," I was like, "Where's the foreplay?" I said, your mouth, and I assumed he thought was Eugene's asshole, which I guess is, I don't know. I mean, that's his name in the comic books, Arsehole, which obviously Cassidy refers to him as that in season 1. But regardless, so that was kind of like, oh, and he gets arrested for it. But I was like, oh, he's calling out Mr. Saint, Mr. Saint. But I didn't think the Saint heard him. I was like, oh, he's about to get sent back to foster care. But the Saint walks out. I'm like, oh, it's going to take you a long time to catch up to him. And then as the cop was talking to Eugene, you could hear the bullet whispering. I'm like, oh, this is going to... And splat. It's like, oh, poor bastard. And obviously it shook Eugene, because obviously he doesn't enjoy all this killing and stuff. But he's like, I don't like all this. But then the cowboy responds, well, this is all part of God's plan, right? And I think that hits Eugene to be like, actually, if everything's happening, that means it was part of God's plan. And also the fact is they're driving, so that's definitely going to make getting around a lot easier. I just love that they made a point of that. Like I said, because you noticed that in season 3. I mean, you noticed it even in season 2, because a cowboy literally chasing after Jesse, Tulip, and Cassidy. It was like the entire time he was just walking. He's walked the entire series that we've come to know him. And then lo and behold, well, because I guess that's even a point, because even, the past of his we saw, like after his horse was killed, he had to walk back home. So there's that whole thing. But I just thought that's kind of neat, and obviously it's going to be easier to track him down, because I let that slip my mind. It's like, right, you can track the word of God. I forgot about that. I completely and utterly forgot about that until Eugene referenced it. I was like, right, that's how you were tracking them all season 2, because it didn't come up at all in season 3. So that's why I think I completely forgot about that. But nevertheless. So there's that side of things. Then there's everything with your boy Cassidy and the whole situation of kind of learning his backstory a little bit. Well, for one, that whole Bensonhurst situation of like the foreskin. Like, I love that it opens with that commercial. I'm like, what the hell is this? And it's like, oh, Toscani's. So I guess that's his own thing. I guess that's kind of like his side business. Either because he's like, oh, this, like, maybe he's always made this cream from foreskin, but now he has like an endless supply, because all he has to do is cut off Cassidy's. Even at the point has Cassidy hooked up to a machine slicing off his foreskin. Like, it's a whole machinery process of getting his foreskin. It was just like, oh God, it's just so painful, dude. It's like, it's funny in a very effed up way, but it more so than anything, it's super morbid and just kind of makes you kind of just, you squish up a little bit, because of it. But it is back to that thing of like, Cassidy does believe he deserves all of it, because he talks about his past a little bit, him in Ireland, and there was like a war, and what ended up happening is his friend, I guess he dragged his friend along into this battle. It was like, no, we're doing the right thing. We're doing this. Let's do this. Let's make our families proud. His friend's leg got blown off. In that instance, his friend couldn't get away, and some soldiers came over and killed him while he hid away. It's like, I think for him, it's like, it's a large amount of shame of like, I'm alive right now because, one, I hid when my friend was in danger. Then he got attacked by a vampire, which I'm so curious. Like, that's something I guess we'll never get an answer to. Like, because she's like all wrinkly and stuff like that. She's like your more I'm about to say traditional vampire, but she's old, and I don't know whether that's just because she's very old, but she attacked Cassidy, ended up turning him, like what her whole deal is. I guess we'll never get an answer to that, but he was so full of shame. He felt like it was better if his family thought he was dead rather than finding out what he'd become. But also, you know, he couldn't live with the guilt of like, oh yeah, I got my best mate killed, you know. So all of that's what's kind of put him in this position right now where he's willing to just take whatever punishment. But as we see at the end, he picked up his angel bow, and like he'd even referred to him as an angel. So I was like, oh, I guess you are an angel. I wasn't sure because we had never, well, the only angels we actually met in the context of the story are Fior and was it LeBlanc or was it DeBlanc? Either way, I think it was DeBlanc. We only met them and they didn't have any wings, not unless that was just them trying to be inconspicuous. Regardless, so I guess he is just a straight up angel, which is like, why do you have him? Maybe they made a point to tell you who he was and I just missed it. But it's like, you have to be someone, for them to really have you captured like that, it must mean some significance. But I'm guessing that's supposed to mean like Cassidy's going to take that feather and get away. I guess he's kind of done taking his punishment. Maybe not, I don't know. All the while there's the whole Tulip thing. Tulip's like, she's like, oh man, it's crazy what happened. All right, I guess I better go to the doctor's like, no, you need a psyche eval. It's like, no, I'm good. And he keeps touching her. He's like, you touched my shoulder twice. He does it again. Bam, she's trying to escape until a nurse comes over and injects her. It's like, okay, how much? Sad thing is, like, he's like probably like the one person in there who does care. It's like, oh, we're supposed to, you know, kind of move the world. That's what we do. We kind of do whatever we want to. But he's like, no, I'm actually here because I want to help people. And I love he basically kind of gives her like the blot test. And it's like, oh, what do you see? And she's basically saying all the terrible stuff. It's like, oh yeah, like blood and brains, this and that, guns, bloods and brains, so forth. Obviously, she's playing into it because the whole point was to make him look at her kind of psychotic. Because you even had the guy next to her in the bed looking over like, what the hell are you seeing? Like on those like, why are you seeing that? I don't see that at all. But he's just hearing her. And even the doctor's like, oh, I'm going to take some notes. She's like, did I pass? Like, what's the test? And it's like, yeah, what was it he said? I need to get the exact word. Right. He refers to her as an uninhibited deviant with a personality disorder, prone to psychopathic outbursts and a gun fetish and unresolved abandonment issues. Which, when you really break it down, kind of describes Tulip. But the thing is, I'm curious about, like, was she just being herself and that ended up getting her free? But I feel like she leaned into it a lot more. Because obviously she wasn't really trying. So that's why I'm kind of like... But I think there's still a lot of truth to that anyway, which I'm curious to see what Tulip does with that. But it's so interesting when you actually break it down and you think about it. It's like, yeah, literally everyone in this group, Cassidy, Tulip, as well as Jesse, are borderline psychopaths. And when you actually break it down and think about it, it's like they're not your traditional heroes when you actually think about it. It's just kind of funny and interesting. All the while you have Featherstone figuring out what Tulip was up to, and she brings this to Hare, which I also love. We get introduced to. He's like, oh yeah, this is Hoover's replacement. I'm gonna call him Hoover too. But I love that it's like he's having that conversation with new Hoover, being like, you know, oh, what do you think about me? And the dude kind of says some very positive things about, yeah, he's also, you know, handsome, right? It's like, wait, what? It's like, yeah, you know, despite all my scars and stuff like that, I'm beautiful. Would you describe me as beautiful or handsome? And the dude's very blunt, being like, no. And it's like, you know, the whole conversation of like, you know, beauty is beauty or whatever, I guess. Because like something like that's so trivial, but it actually does matter to Hare with his missing eye and his penis head and his literal foreskin ear. There's that whole thing. But, you know, and he's like, yeah, I guess ugly is ugly. I think on moments like this, he misses the original Hoover. Because Hoover wouldn't say anything like that. Hoover would be like, man, of course, sir, you're handsome, you're beautiful. Like, of course he would. But this guy, he's very blunt. He has no tact whatsoever. So there's that. Which I think there's definitely going to be some interesting dynamics between him and Featherstone. Because like Featherstone had her issues with Hoover, but he was kind of like... Because it seems more so like Hoover too might be trying to be like, oh, like saying... What was it he said about her exactly? Saying that she's like... I forgot. Erratic or something. Hysterical or something like that. When she was trying to explain everything. And then it's like, yep, Tulip's here, but she already got away. Because the reason why she was let free, because it's like, hey, there's nothing to cure lunacy, like someone being a lunatic, so there's no cure for that. So by the time, you know, sadly, Tulip just missed Cassidy when she gets there. He was already being taken away, so holy crap. Like I said, so many interesting things going down in this episode. I'm so excited to see ultimately where all this ends up taking us next episode. Jesse's plane crash, Tulip racing to go after Cassidy. Like, is Cassidy going to make his break, or is he just going like? Because I'm trying to understand that Benson Hurst situation at the beginning. Had he already been there, and then like this is going to be his more permanent home? I think is what Frank was kind of suggesting. So the whole thing at the beginning did happen. He got thrown back in his cell, and then like Frank is like, I'm setting it up because Harry wants me to just throw you out in the sun. It's like, no. A guy like you deserves a home, so he's planning to take him to Bensonhurst to be like a full blown. But like I said, that depends on, like, Cassidy at the end, he's kind of smiling, seems like he's kind of made up his mind to be like, no, I'm ready, I'm kind of breaking free type of thing. So, I don't know. I thought it was kind of interesting. I am curious, like, how much of his family is still actually alive. He probably hasn't really looked into it, you know, so we'll ultimately have to wait and see. Like, I forgot, like, didn't he have his son, like, much later? I think he did, because his son wasn't, like, crazy. Well, his son was older, sure, but not like crazy old. I doubt he would have been alive if like Cassie had him like around that time when he became a vampire. Regardless, I'm just me going on a tangent. Like I said, very interested to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.